President Petro Poroshenko has called for UN peacekeepers to be deployed to eastern Ukraine to enforce a ceasefire. At an emergency security meeting, he said such a force would help guarantee security in a situation where the promise of peace is not being kept. His comments came after Ukrainian troops withdrew from the strategic city of Debaltseve after intense fighting. The rebel advance on Debaltseve, which came in spite of the ceasefire agreed last week, has been widely condemned. Mr. Poroshenko's request was approved by Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council at the emergency meeting on Wednesday night. The issue was discussed and a decision has been taken to appeal to the UN and the EU concerning the setting up in Ukraine of a peacekeeping and security operation, Council Secretary Olexander Turchynov told reporters. The move came after President Poroshenko said almost 2,500 Ukrainian soldiers had withdrawn from Debaltseve on Wednesday. President Poroshenko met with troops who withdrew from Debaltseve. He said the withdrawal had been organized, but that at least 6 soldiers were killed and more than 100 wounded. Earlier, a senior Ukrainian military official said 22 Ukrainian soldiers had died in Debaltseve over the past 3 days. Rebel claims of a much higher figure have been dismissed by the government. The ceasefire, which came into effect on Sunday, has been broadly observed elsewhere in eastern Ukraine and some heavy weaponry is said to have been withdrawn by both sides. However, staff from the OSCE security group that is monitoring the ceasefire have been unable to reach Debaltseve. Rebel spokesman Eduard Basurin said the town was now completely under the control of the separatists, with just scattered pockets of resistance that were being neutralized. He claimed that more than 300 government soldiers had been taken prisoner. Ukraine's government admitted some troops were being held by rebels but gave no figure. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said the rebels' offensive had put the wider peace agreement at risk. The White House said both the rebels and Russia had failed to live up to the terms of the agreement signed in the Belarusian capital Minsk last week. But Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov insisted the rebels' actions in Debaltseve had not violated the ceasefire because it was a rebel-held city at the time of the agreement. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford in Moscow said the feeling there is that a lull in the fighting may now be possible, rather than an immediate push for more territory by the rebels. Mr. Poroshenko was due to discuss the situation in a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin and the leaders of France and Germany. Correspondents say the loss of Debaltseve is a significant setback for Ukraine because of its strategic position as a transport hub between the rebel-held cities of Donetsk and Luhansk. Most of its 25,000 population has been evacuated, but about 5,000 civilians are still believed to be in the town. One rebel commander there told the BBC that conditions were dire, with no electricity and a shortage of food and water. The UN says more than 5,600 people have been killed in the conflict, but there are fears the actual death toll could be much higher. Fighting began in eastern Ukraine in April, a month after Russia annexed the Crimea Peninsula. Ukraine's pro-Western government says Russia is supporting the separatists with troops and weapons, but the Kremlin has consistently denied this.